Bonsoir tout le monde. My name is Jean-Louis Deveau, and I will be your moderator for this evening's debate. Si vous avez des questions en français, n'hésitez pas de les poser. On va procéder majoritairement en anglais, mais si vous avez des questions en français, n'hésitez pas de les poser dans votre langue maternelle, et ça me fera plaisir de les traduire. So we're going to be conducting the meeting mostly primarily in English, but if people want to ask questions in French, they are at liberty to do so. This debate tonight is about talking about the pros and the cons of shale gas mining development in New Brunswick. The organizing committee sent invitations to about 15 representatives from government and industry to represent the affirmative side. The names of those individuals are listed in the press release that was sent out on Tuesday. We've set up name tags and left some empty chairs in the front for those people that we sent invitations to, in the hopes that perhaps at the 11th hour they will join us. If not, then we will proceed as follows. This morning, the media was asking me, well, Jean-Louis, how can you possibly have a debate if the affirmative side is not being represented? And my response to that was very simple. A debate is simply a discussion between two groups of people on a particular issue. And tonight we're having a discussion on the pros and cons of shale gas. Debaters clubs do this all the time. So this is how we will be proceeding. But before I get into that, I want to tell a little bit of a story. This last semester, from January to April, I had the privilege of teaching a course here at St. Thomas University in sociology. Sociology is the study of how society works. And the course that I taught was entitled Social Control and Social Justice. One of the things that I drilled into my students' minds throughout the semester was this idea that we are ruled by text. This is an idea that comes from a well-known Canadian sociologist by the name of Dorothy Smith. Now, what does that mean, we are ruled by text? Well, let me give you an example. Supposing you're driving your vehicle and the police stops you, asks you for your license, and by golly, you forgot to renew the darn thing because you were so busy running your kids to hockey practice. Well, you present your expired license to the police officer, and he says, your license has expired. You are not entitled to be driving any vehicle. Even though you've been driving the same vehicle for 30 years, that's immaterial. It's the text in your wallet that is of importance. That driver's license that you're supposed to have renewed. Let me give you another example. I'm a married person. I don't have a wedding band on my finger. So I could say at any given time that I'm not married. I don't think my wife is in the room tonight, so I think I'm safe. Having said that, there is a text in our filing cabinets at home called a marriage certificate, which basically trumps anything that I might have to say about whether or not I'm married. Again, the text takes precedence. So those are a couple of examples of how texts are involved in ruling our lives. And there are other examples. The Indian Act is a ruling text. Passports, library cards, bus numbers, speed limit signs, and so on and so on. So these texts are meaningless, of course, until they are activated by someone in position of power. I'm sure that you've lived the experience of, at one point or another, phoning a government office and asking for information. And the information was not made readily available to you. The person on the other end of the phone probably said, well, I've got to check the manual, or I've got to check the book and see what it actually says before I can give you an answer. Well, this is what's happening tonight. Our colleagues on the affirmative side have accumulated a huge repertoire of texts that have been disseminated by both government and industry. So they will be bringing those texts to life tonight. And the individual who will be doing that is Mark Darcy from the Friends of UNB Woodlawn. He was supposed to have been joined by Peter DeMarche, but Peter DeMarche, unfortunately, was unable to be here tonight. On the negative side, we have 5 individuals. On my immediate right is Mark Connell. He's a retired geologist, and he can no doubt speak of the geology of the province as it relates to this industry. Sitting next to him is Corinne Hershey. She is a sociology professor at St. Thomas University, and her interests are focused on understanding how it is that government in this industry have duped us into believing that we need to stay on the bandwagon of continuous economic growth and in complete disregard towards the other creatures which we share the planet. Hazel Richardson is with the Sierra Club of Canada, and she sent me some information about herself earlier this evening, which I unfortunately did not get to include in my notes. Immediately next to her is Jim Emberger. He's a member of the Taymount Community Association. Questions related to economic issues, chemicals used in hydraulic fracturing, government regulations, and the effects the industry will have on farm animals, wildlife, fish and wildlife, as well as forests may be directed to Jim. And sitting at the far end of the table is Stephanie Merrill. Stephanie Merrill is with the Conservation Council of New Brunswick. She has insights on water management, industrialization of rural areas, climate change, the New Brunswick regulatory environment, and has visited areas in Arkansas and northern BC where shale gas development is in full production. So, the ground rules for this evening are as follows. Very shortly, I will be asking the panelists to speak 2 minutes as to why they are here tonight, why it is of importance for them to be present tonight. And they can also elaborate on what they would like to speak to on the subject matters that should be of interest to all of you tonight. Gary Guild, who's sitting right in front of me, is our official timer. And Joan Tremblay is our secretary, and she will make she is here to keep me in line. Essentially, everything's going to circulate pretty much around those lights. So I encourage both the panelists and the members of the audience to keep their eyes on the lights. When the yellow light comes on, it means you've got 30 seconds to wrap up. And when the red light comes on, it means the floor will open up and you will be swooped down underneath. Just kidding. The red light means that you should be giving your turn to whoever is behind you. Okay, so in terms of the audience members, what we would like to encourage is for folks to line up behind the microphone to ask your questions, to either give a comment and hopefully ask a question from the panelists. If you know directly who you want to address your question to, you can specify that to me and I will direct the question to the panelists that you've selected. If you're not sure, I will try and make that decision, and if I'm unsuccessful, we'll have a debate as to who might want to answer the question. But the key is that for every question asked, the panelists only have 2 minutes to respond. 2 minutes on the affirmative side and 2 minutes on the negative side. to make sure, sometimes if you're really passionate about giving an answer to something, you might forget some critical issues. So to make it fair, what we thought we'd do is we'd give both sides 5 cards, 5 red flags. So if, for instance, Jim was explaining an issue, finished his 2-minute period, and somebody else wanted to add something to it, they can red flag me and we'll provide that individual an additional 2 minutes. The same thing will apply to the other side. But there's only 5 cards, and once you've used one, as you use them, they're done. You can't have them back. And don't rip them, please. Okay. We will be addressed by members of political parties who specifically asked to be able to say a few words. At the moment, I think there's only two, a representative from the Green Party and the candidate who's vying for the position of mayor. That's the only 2 people that I am aware of. If there's any additional folks, Dominique, okay, very good. Hello, bienvenue. So that means 3 individuals, and what we're going to be doing is giving you folks an opportunity to speak sometime in the evening. We'll figure it out as we go along. The washrooms are through that door on my right-hand side. The ladies' washroom is directly in that area. The men's washroom, you have to walk a little bit further to your left, go through another set of doors, and then it's the first door after that. It's the washroom for people with disabilities that you've been asked to utilize. There's water, coffee, and tea on that side. We did not schedule any breaks. We're going to hopefully be able to go straight through from now until 9, 10 at the max. And the organizing committee, by the way, is paying for this hall out of our own pockets, out of their own pockets. So we're asking for donations if you would be so kind. Do we have a donation box anywhere?
There's a jar here. Well, yeah, we can use this one too.
Okay, there's a jar over there in the front. Okay, perfect. This session is being videotaped by Rob Turgeon. He's the producer of a documentary film called Be Without Water. And the purpose for this is, just like any football game, coaches often like to videotape the game to see what went well, what didn't go so well. And we're hoping that this is going to be the first of a series of debates throughout the province, and it's for that purpose that we are, one of the reasons why we're videotaping this session. Okay, so that's enough of me. I will now ask, and I usually always start with the affirmative side, I will ask Mark to give 2 minutes as to why he thinks it's important for him to be here this evening. And then I will ask the same thing from the negative side. So, Mr. Timer, as soon as Mark starts to speak, you start your stopwatch. When there's 30 seconds left, you give him the yellow light. And when there's no time left, you give him the red light.
Good evening. The group that I'm with is called Friends of UNB Woodlot. I will be representing the government viewpoints when people ask direct questions from the audience, but our organization has been in place since 2007 to respond to the fragmentation development of the 3,800 acres forested wetlands at the top of Southside Fredericton. It's one of the premier research and teaching forests. Most of the large, very well-known universities in North America have such forests, and our university is choosing to carve it up and have big box and other commercial development ruin it. Since 2007, we've learned a lot about wetland and watershed regulatory protection policies. not only in the city, but in the province in general. Along comes shale gas, and we've seen a systematic dismantling of the wetland and watershed protection in this province. And certainly our group, with our working knowledge of using the UNB woodlot as a litmus test, we have had to jump into the shale gas issue and become a strong opponent and prevent this from taking over and industrializing our farmland, our rural areas, our forestry and fishing lands. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. It's been suggested to me that since the microphone for the video recording is right over here on my thingamabob, it might be better if individuals, particularly from this side, could come up and address the audience from here. So perhaps we could start with Mark.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a geologist, and I have a deep interest in the environment, and there are 4 technical myths that need to be dispelled. One is that fracking produces, is alleged by industry to be clean, that the fluids that they use are non-toxic, or that we don't have the that they're using clean chemicals. The slick water is full of dozens of toxic chemicals, mostly related to hydrocarbons, ethylenes, benzenes, toluenes, formaldehydes, and on. Secondly, the second technical question is that the industry alleges that the pollution going out into the air, the methane, is relatively clean, that gas is a clean burning fuel. And yes, it is a clean burning fuel. However, the losses along the way by degassing, the decompression of the wells, the transportation along pipelines, the joining, the coupling, and the differentiation by extracting ethylene from the methane produces about a 14% loss of methane over the life of the time of extraction. This is important because methane is 105 times more potent as a greenhouse gas. Thirdly, our water is jeopardized. Although these wells are deep, methane has been observed up to a kilometer away from drill holes, and they increase to the rate of leakage over time. So after 14 or 15 years, the amount of methane coming up and frac fluids as well, but more importantly, the methane is polluting the water tank. I guess I don't have any time for the fourth and further, so I'll pass that on.
Thank you, Mark. I'm sure you'll have an opportunity to come back to that. Corinne?
The reason that I'm here is because I see what's been happening to our environment, but more importantly, and I guess what's happening to the living creatures that inhabit the environment. We own some land out in Peniac, and I've been watering dogs out there for years. And the past few years, as the urbans have continued to clear cut, the animals are moving further into urban areas, and then we shoot them and put a bounty on them. And then comes along shale gas development. It's more than what I want to see happen. And because I hate cancer, and I hate the spread of cancer, and I hate any industry that disregards their responsibility in dumping pollutants and toxins into the air, I'm willing to take a stand for it, I guess. When you watch people around you die with cancer, and you know that they're environmentally linked, and that our governments bring in foreign investment industries that have little to do with wanting the well-being of the province. They just want to strip our resources, and they want to take everything from us that they can, and we have government leaders that are willing to sell
Were you folks in the back able to hear Corinne? Yep, okay, excellent. Hazel?
Hi, so I'm with the Sierra Club, the Atlantic Canada chapter, and hydraulic fracturing is actually a threat to all the Atlantic Canadian provinces. I was invited tonight and I really wanted to come because we are very, very concerned about the impact with the amount of water that's going to be used, the way it's going to be disposed of. We've been trying to get answers from the government. They don't want to talk about it. They won't tell us anything about their plans for where they're going to obtain the billions of gallons of water that they're going to need if they go ahead with this. How they're going to dispose of the highly toxic wastewater, and what's going on with right now where we have waste being shipped to divert. So these are the issues that concern us, and I was really hoping that tonight we would get some people from the government to actually answer these questions so that people are aware of the issues and the plans that they have in place to address these, whether it's something that they've even thought of. So that's why I'm here tonight.
Thank you, Hazel. Okay, so we have 2 more individuals, which means probably another 4-5 minutes. So what I would like folks to start thinking about is what question you'd like to come up and ask the panel. So very shortly, I'm going to be asking people to come up to that microphone over there and ask questions of the panel.
Hi, I'm Jim Emberger from Taymouth Community Association, and like many people who would consider themselves environmentalists, we in Taymouth were kind of excited when we heard about a new source of clean burning natural gas. But our community, in addition to being your typical rural farming community, is also populated with a number of people with scientific backgrounds, from petroleum geology to hydrology to ecology, and we started investigating what it meant to get this gas out of the ground. I got the job of being sort of the chief researcher because my background, while I'm not a scientist, I'm a retired software developer, so I'm good with computers, and I once directed an environmental education nonprofit, and I also spent 4 years as an investigator for the Federal Energy Administration in the United States. It was a regulatory agency for the gas and oil industry, so I'm pretty familiar with how they work. We're here tonight. Our concerns were that as the deeper we got into all this, we realized that virtually every aspect of shale gas, from the chemicals, the technology, to the use of water, to the health effects, to the effects on the environment, you name it, that it was all new. There were no long-term studies on any aspect of this development, which struck us as kind of scary, seeing as how it was going full steam ahead. And then we realized that this industry wouldn't even exist, except for the fact that the first thing they did was get themselves exempted from all the environmental regulations. So that turned on our red flags, and since then we've been investigating. The more we investigate, the more we're committed to opposing this. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least is Stephanie Merrill from the Conservation Council of New Brunswick.
Hi everybody, I direct our freshwater protection program at the Conservation Council, and I was hired to work on water policy across the province 2 years ago, and at the time our executive director David Kuhn said you might want to look into this thing called fracking because we might have to respond to it at some point. Exactly 1 month later, Department of Natural Resources allocated 1 million hectares of land to Southwestern Energy for oil and gas exploration. So I've spent almost the whole time, the last 2 years, researching, visiting other jurisdictions that have, are further along in the development of shale gas exploration, like Arkansas, Pennsylvania, and northeastern British Columbia. So we've kind of gone through an evolution of our position on shale gas. At first we called for a moratorium because we really needed to get our feet under us and have some time to do some research. And as we did that, we realized that although water was kind of the trigger for us getting involved, it's a much bigger issue than just water, and we know it's about climate change, rural industrialization, and human health, air impacts. And so we just came to the conclusion, like a lot of other people here, that the risks and impacts cannot be regulated away, and therefore this is not an industry that fits the vision that we have for our future in Brunswick.
Thank you, Stephanie. Okay, now it's your turn. This is basically an event that was organized for you, for the people of Fredericton, for the people of New Brunswick in general, those of you who are driving from afar. So I invite anyone to come to the microphone in the front, and to ask our first question.
Well, I'll try and break the ice. My name's Tony Short. I'm a mechanical engineer. Geology is not my background whatsoever. However, I've heard that the Mayor of Fredericton and presumably members of council have prohibited any sort of drilling and well exploration work and what have you within the limits of the city of Fredericton, the implication being that this will therefore protect the water, which is all well water for the city of Fredericton. Frankly, I'm very skeptical about all of this. I think that the aquifer from which the city draws its water extends well beyond just the political boundaries of the city of Fredericton. Is my skepticism well-founded? Is limiting drilling to just outside these boundaries of the city of Fredericton, is that sufficient? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question. Since we started with the affirmative side initially, I will ask this side, the negative side, to respond to the question. Would you mind coming up, please?
First, I want to clarify what did happen at City Council, because several of us were there. The mayor did not state that no fracking would happen in the city. He stated that the companies would have to ask the city first, and the city would ask that the government do groundwater testing. I believe that was the way that it was worded. That was the resolution. Yes, you have every right to be skeptical. The main reason, I think, is because the companies that actually do the fracking, even on the outset, and Mark had a lot of scientific evidence about the air quality, which is something we have to worry about along with the water, but certainly our groundwater is affected through leakages underground, even if there's no casing breakage. So it can migrate. There's chemicals that I've researched, that many of us have researched, that actually migrate underground. And they cannot, you can't say, well, here's the city limit water, let's stop here. And it can't, it just can't be that cut and dry. Also, the companies do not have to tell us what chemicals they're using. And if a legislation ever did come down that they do have to tell us what they're using, then there's also chemicals that would be protected under IPR or proprietary rights, and we would not know what's being put into the water.
Thank you, Caroline. Mark, would you like to respond?
I'm reading from the facts about shale gas, government publication. During the Christmas break, this was a flyer that the government released in the newspapers, including the Telegraph Journal. And I'll read the response. How will groundwater be protected where hydraulic fracturing takes place? The concern for most people is that hydraulic fracturing fluids may contaminate drinking water aquifers by being pushed toward the surface along fault lines and fracture planes. The likelihood of this occurring is remote, given the depth at which hydraulic fracturing for shale gas is typically occurring and the distance to drinking water aquifers. Shale gas deposits currently being developed in New Brunswick are at a depth of approximately 2,000 to 3,000 meters below ground surface. The limit of freshwater aquifers in New Brunswick is around 200 meters depth. The intervening rock contains multiple layers of tight rock formations, which would help to prevent the upward migration of water fluids to drinking water aquifers. And from SWN, publication that was provided to people outside Fredericton during a public information session last summer. Southwestern Energy prides itself in developing innovative solutions associated with our productions located near waterways. For example, when faced with the challenge of connecting a well situated in one side of a waterway to a compressor station on the other, our on-site team's environmentally friendly solution included bringing in a directional boring machine to perform the work, staying at least 300 feet from the banks of the river, minimizing tree clearing necessary to set up operating equipment, and installing erosion control materials, including silt fencing and hay bales.